Arkush. Thank you for joining me on The Last Reel. These reels are a good way for me to explore film history and film culture topics that I like to study in my spare time when I'm not teaching film production. I'm just crazy about film, and I'm going to make all of you my postgraduate students. Now, there are two directors whose work I've been watching closely for the last couple of years, and there's some excellent box sets out there that are well preserved and very complete. The first is Lois Weber, one of the most important women directors of the first 25 years of film history, and this is a 5 DVD box set. And there's a lot of directors in here that I've never heard of, and I highly recommend it. The other director is maybe more well-known, Lupino. This is 4 of her feature films, well put together set, and maybe someday someone will take all her TV shows and make a box set out of them so that I can relive my youth. Lois Weber directed over 140 shorts and features between 1911 and 1931. She was the first woman to direct a feature film, the first woman in the Directors Guild of America. And in the late teens, she was as highly thought of and as well paid as DW Griffith, Cecil B. DeMille, and Charlie Chaplin. She started in acting, but then quickly moved to directing, writing, and producing. She had her own production company, and doing all these jobs, they managed to turn out one new film a week for almost a year. She was born in Allegheny, Pennsylvania in 1879, which makes her a contemporary of D.W. Griffith. As a child, she was a musical prodigy on the piano, and as a teenager, she conducted the local symphony orchestra. Religion, faith, and morals were central to her. Later on in life, all these values showed up in her work. She actually left home to become a street preacher and joined the Salvation Army. Later on, as a director, her nickname was Preacher. By 1904, she moved to New York City because she wanted to perform on the stage. And that's where she met her first husband, Philip Smalley.
As I was convinced that the theatrical profession needed a missionary, the best way to reach them was to become one of them. So I went on the stage filled with a great desire to convert my fellow men.
Together, they put on several productions, with both of them acting in them. Now, he took all the credit, he chased all the other actresses, and he drank all the liquor. Somehow, this marriage lasted to 1931. Phillips Smalley and Lois left the theater because of the opportunities to work together on films. This is where our story gets really interesting and fate takes over. The film business in New York City and in Fort Lee, New Jersey was booming, and the couple was working all the time. The producer of one of Lois's films was Herbert Blanchet, who was married to the #1 female director in the world, Alice Guy Blanchet, who just a few years before, in the late 1990s, was a secretary to the president of Gaumont Projectors and Cameras. He needed some film to be shot so that he could demonstrate his projector. She was assigned the task, but she actually wrote a script and filmed a narrative, a fairy tale. This is the first narrative film ever made. It was a huge success. It was so successful that they moved to New York City and then built a studio in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Herbert Blanchet saw in Lois what he had seen in his wife, in her acting and her demeanor. Within a film or two, he offered her the chance to direct. She never looked back.
In moving pictures, I have found my life's work. I find it once an outlet for my emotions and my ideals. I can preach to my heart's content, and with the opportunity to write the play, act the leading role, and direct the entire production, if my message fails to reach someone, I can blame only myself.
Not just merely a director, but a bold visual stylist and natural at the camera. What an imagination. In a movie she did called The Rosary, which we're going to see some scenes from, she places the entire film within the circular line of rosary beads. It's a stunning example of mise en scène because the beads are, of course, an example of her religious beliefs, which is at the core of this picture. She did a movie called Suspense, which is as modern as what Hitchcock was doing years later. All this before DW Griffith. She cross cuts, there's close ups, there's POV shots, and there's a car chase. She really was gaining talent with each film that she directed. That and at least 8 other one-reelers is what she accomplished in her very first year. In 1915, she wrote and directed Hypocrites, a film about the hypocrisy of masculine institutions and the oppression of femininity. A priest contemplates a fall from grace and dreams of medieval times and the unveiling of a new statue. It's the female form, and it is to blame for all of society's ills. Hence, it must be hidden and controlled. It features Margaret Edwards, the first fully nude female performer. Hypocrites was subjected to Catholic censorship in Boston and banned in Ohio. The New York Times declared it daring, and artistic. Well, for example, this tracking shot with hundreds of extras was extraordinary for the time. Hypocrites was a huge artistic and financial success. So much so that Carl Laemmle, the head of Universal Studios, which you can see in the background here, offered her an overall deal, the first one ever offered to a woman. She'd have her own production company and could design the shooting stages anywhere she wanted, and they ended up in Hollywood. Now, Universal looked quite a bit different in those days. But in 1915, Lois Weber ran for mayor of Universal City and won. Her city council and police chief were all women. Energized by her new economic and creative freedom, Lois Weber turned even more towards films that mirrored her convictions. Subjects like birth control, family planning, and abortion. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle was made with the help of Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood. Shoes is about a single mother who turns to prostitution to supply her kids with clothing and food. But things were not all good. The Supreme Court ruled that films are not protected by the First Amendment and that birth control is against the law. Then came 1921, and What Do Men Want? A scathing indictment of selfish men who think only of their own possessions and ignore the desires for love, companionship, and self-determination of the women in their lives. One of these wives is driven to suicide by her husband. She dies in a vivid drowning in MacArthur Park. The studio hated the movie. The public rejected it, and Universal canceled her deal. She was bereft, and with her husband, they went to Europe to see if they could patch their marriage back together. But to no avail. They were divorced, and she went into a deep depression that lasted almost 2 years. She returned to filmmaking, but nothing seemed to click. It seems that even though she was a visual virtuoso, her moralizing and old-fashioned storytelling was not playing in the jazz age, something that even plagued DW Griffith. We're in front of 1550 North Sierra Bonita in West Hollywood. In the 1920s, this was a 5-acre empty lot that Lois Weber bought and erected her second studio. Her career was in decline, but she never gave up trying to revive it. Eventually, she had to sell it for real estate, and apartment buildings were built here, one of which she became the landlady of. And she died in 1939. She's almost forgotten until now. This is Allan Arkush at Trailers from Hell with a tribute to Ida Lupino. Ms. Lupino was only the second woman admitted to the Directors Guild of America. Yeah, you heard that right, only the second, which is truly ironic because her directorial work shaped television throughout the 50s and 60s, which meant my prime time of watching, and she directed some of my favorite shows like Have Gun Will Travel, The Untouchables, 77 Sunset Strip, The Fugitive, The Rifleman, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Twilight Zone, Thriller, Climax, and The Pilot to Gilligan's Island. Ms. Lupino started out as an actress in the 30s, and in the 40s she moved to Warner Brothers along with Bette Davis. They were both known as the most intense actresses on the lot. Outstanding work she did in movies like The Man I Love, They Drive by Night, opposite Humphrey Bogart in the classic High Sierra, John Garfield and Edward G. Robinson in The Sea Wolf, The Big Knife, On Dangerous Ground, and 100 more. Whenever she worked on set, she sought the counsel of her directors. We're talking Hollywood icons like Nicholas Ray, William Wellman, and her mentor, Raoul Walsh. She wanted to be behind the camera producing movies that were realistic and issue-oriented. She announced her goal as, it's not who is in the picture, but what is in the picture. Her topics were not mainstream. They were out of wedlock mothers, polio, and in The Outrage, our trailer from hell, sexual assault. On her first production, Not Wanted, on the second day of shooting, her director got a heart attack. So she had to step in and take over. And what's remarkable about this movie is that she seemed to have a full visual style from the very beginning. It was seamless. And when you watch the film, she really gets you to understand what this young pregnant woman is going through. Today, they would call that style female gaze. From there, it was noir movies like The Outrage and The Hitchhiker, both around this kino block. It's a great body of work. And to illustrate that, we are presenting our trailer from hell from 1950, The Outrage.
When did you first notice the man following you? When did you first notice him?
Lupino's taste in roles shaped what she chose to do as a director. I like the strong character, something with some guts to it. Just a straight role drives me up the wall.
There's 60 million men in this country, and I found the right one.
How tough was she? Vincent Sherman, a director that she did not get along with, said she wouldn't give you the time of day if she had 2 watches.
If I was your boyfriend, you wouldn't have to buy me no cake. You better make up your mind. I might be moving on next week. Hey, beautiful!
Cinematic artistry is evident in the scene depicting the brutal rape. Graphic displays were prohibited by the code, yet Ida was determined to convey the degradation of the experience. She rose to the challenge by creating a 6-minute sequence of suspense and terror that gives the audience the opportunity to identify with the victim's humiliation. Martin Scorsese observes, what is at stake in Lupino's films is the psyche of the victim. They address the wounded souls and painful process of women trying to reclaim their lives.
Let your family know we are. And we all have to stop running sometime. We have to face ourselves.
The Outrage on Trailers from Hell. Well, the film's about to run out here on the last reel and class is about to end. And as always, everything discussed today will be on the final and most important of all, neatness and spelling count. So if you want to get extra credit, I suggest you read From Reverence to Rape by Molly Haskell or Backwards and Heels by Alicia Malone. Special thank you to my TA, my teacher's assistant, Andrew Elijah Milam. So until I thread up the next reel, I'm going to save a place for you on the couch.